Welcome back to the Evergreen RX. I'm your host, Hayden, licensed mental health therapist, Cancer Moon, and the first to get deep at any party, if I indeed show up to said party. Yeah, so I pressed record on this podcast, or I was about to, like 7 hours ago. And then I realized from a text from my therapist that I was supposed to have session right then. So then I had to pivot and have session, and then I had a whole day of training for this training that I'm doing that I actually just completed for a therapy model. And now I'm back. So yeah, that was interesting. I was like really revved up to record, ready to go. And then life had a different plan for me, but that just means that I'm even more ready and excited to talk about this listener question today. That's how we're going to take it. If you're new to the podcast, this is an exciting episode to jump in on because it's the first time I've talked about money and finances in a really, actually probably at all, but definitely in a very concerted way. So that's exciting as a Taurus sun, with my sun in the 8th house. I'm all down for talking about finances, getting your material needs met, creating a strong, secure, grounded base for yourself. So I'm here for it. And yeah, so if this is, again, if it's your first time tuning in, hi, welcome. And just a little heads up, my little disclaimer that although I answer listener questions, I'm not sitting up here on my high horse or pedestal of any sort saying that I know what you should do or how you should run your life or that I have answers. In particular, this podcast is made by me, a 20-something, for 20-somethings, not to be like prescriptive or dogmatic or tell you what to do, but to create a community to figure these things out together. Because if I know anything about self-growth, wellness, life in general, it's that the deeper you get into it, the more complicated it gets and the more nuanced. And so we have to have nuanced responses to that as well, I think, to really live a life that feels good to us. And so, yeah, keep that in mind, that I am not trying to make blanket statements here, but hopefully some of the things I have to say will help. And yeah, if you want to submit your own questions, please do at theevergreenrx@gmail.com, or you can text or call 512-655-9888 and leave me a nice little voicemail or text message with your question. And you can go as specific or as general as you'd like. If you go back and listen to some of the episodes in this archive, you will find that we run the gamut of topics, about how specific and niche to really general things. Like last episode was just about burnout, and just about burnout. I mean, it's an important topic, but kind of a large one. So, yeah, whatever you want, whatever you're feeling, girly. Okay, so let's go ahead and open the shop up for real this time, and hear what this listener has to say. Okay, dear Evergreen, lately I've been realizing how much my relationship with money affects my mental health. I feel guilty when I spend on myself, anxious when I save because I'm always wondering if it's enough, and sometimes I avoid looking at my bank account altogether. I know money is supposed to be practical, but it feels very emotional for me, like it's tied up with my sense of self-worth. How do I build a healthier, less shame-filled relationship with money without feeling like I have to ignore reality? Great question. And off the top, money is very emotional for so many people for so many different reasons. Out of almost any topic, I first go to ancestry and generational patterns when it comes to money. Like, it is, think about it, like money is what makes the world go round, like, generational wealth or not having certain access to things, like it builds generation to generation the kind of relationship that our ancestry has with money, and then thus what gets passed down to us. So it is super emotional and weighted, because honestly, I think it's like food in the way that it seems so practical and necessary and seemingly straightforward, but I think because it is so necessary and vital for life, it is so fraught. Because, I mean, how could it not be? It's central to the way that we live, or to kind of what quality of life feels accessible to us, privilege, class, like how we get viewed by other people, the risks we can take, the opportunities afforded to us. It's everything, and it's everywhere all the time. Reference that movie. I love Everything Everywhere all the time. Wait. Girl, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Not quite, but that's a great movie if you haven't seen it. But our thought process and our experience and knowledge and relationship to money can be shaped so much by the people before us, and not just the people living, but dead too. But I mean, even just with our living family, like the way money is spoken about or not, it informs our relationship to our finances. And, that shit gets encoded in our DNA. If you don't know much about generational trauma or wounds or patterning, look it up. Or I can do an episode about it. Ask me if you want. But yeah, it's a big deal. And it just kind of gets embedded in us. And so depending on how you grew up or what generations before you experienced when it came to finances, you're going to have a certain set of issues or discomfort or beliefs around your money. And so all that to say that it is really emotional. And I mean, it's so great to recognize that, because when we don't, we can get caught up in just kind of staying in a very avoidant place with it. And that can get us into trouble. And I hear in this listener question, like, they're not wanting to do that. It's important to have a healthy relationship around our money, to be able to look at things, to evaluate, and make informed decisions. So, more often than not, we aren't explicitly taught about finances, and money is typically like a hush-hush topic. To be fair, I'm speaking from a very American-centric view, so I'm not exactly sure in other cultures if there are certain cultures where money is spoken about much more openly. I know it's the same thing with like sex. It varies culture to culture how much it's spoken about. But from my general understanding, money's kind of one of those things, like, you don't talk about it. It's not polite. You're not saying how much you're making, how much you're saving. Like, you don't want to ask direct questions about like numbers and things. But what that can lead to is, then how do we know? How do we learn? And, I think it's also interesting to kind of think, or to ask yourself the question, like, who has taught you that money should be a quiet thing, or something that you don't look about, or you don't speak openly with other people about? So the general conflict that jumps out to me in this listener question is that you're stressed about spending too much or not saving enough, but also there's no way to quell those fears, because another part of you doesn't want to look at like the hard data. You don't have a grasp on your financial situation. So there's no like facts or figures that you can really use to quell or to inform the choices you're making on spending and saving. So it's just this like amorphous question mark, and that can be really draining. So it's totally normal to not want to look at this stuff again, because if we grew up in like a family where it's like, no, oh, that's so impolite, don't talk about like, oh, so-and-so just bought a new car, really nice new car, don't talk about like how much that must have cost, or how much do they make in their job? Like, even simple curiosities can be really looked down on. And so it's really normal to avoid the topic altogether. Or if there's a lot of fear around something, that can make it even more fraught. Like, now I really don't want to log into my bank account because, like, I've just been spending and doing what I can do for the past 7 years without actually looking or being very aware of where my money is at. And like, ooh, it's kind of like a bad haircut or like getting into like a car accident or fender bender or something. There's an instinct to want to be like, I don't want to look because at least I don't know how bad it is. Like, someone please spare me from how bad it is. Except that leaves us in a perpetual state of anxiety, right? Like say I backed into a pole in a parking lot, which I'm just saying, like, hypothetically, it's not like I've ever done that or anything, but and I just thought, ooh, that sounded bad. Now I don't want to look. I'm just going to like drive off. I'm going to drive home. Like, I'm going to be really tense that whole time because I don't know, is my back bumper crunched in, or is it like a little smudge of paint and it's basically like nothing? And whew, that was lucky. I have no clue. And so I have no way to relax. And even if I was to look and saw, damn, it is really crunched in, at least I can start to do something about it and figure out, what next choice I want to make. So, that's to say two things. One is there's a potential that really looking and getting into the nitty-gritty of your finances won't be as bad as you think. But also, it at least enables you to do something about it, which that in and of itself can be really anxiety relieving. Even if you have debt or you have not saved nearly as much as you feel like you should at this point, well, now you have an opportunity to turn things around versus just soldiering on without looking and then potentially getting yourself into a worse position down the road. And because you brought up shame and a shame-filled relationship with money, I just want to say a little trick about shame. Shame thrives in darkness and in secret, in the big question mark, in the what ifs, in the I'm not going to tell anybody because that's too embarrassing. No one would ever accept me. People would judge me. Whatever it is, that is where shame thrives. And so sometimes even just naming it can lighten the load. It's really miraculous, honestly. And so, I mean, good on you and whoever's listening for asking these kinds of questions and for evaluating, because it really takes bravery to step up and to face something that feels really large and emotionally loaded for you. And then the next step, how we undo shame even further and regulate that anxiety, is to take a look at your finances. And we just have to bring all of this to light and understand that we all have a relationship with money. Like I was saying, maybe someone listening, one of you grew up with a family that constantly talked about money, talked about how much you either had or didn't have, how much other people had, what status that gave them, feeling like you are more or less fortunate than other people, that there's some kind of moral hierarchy to money and how much people have. Or you're in a family that doesn't say a thing about it. Either like don't flaunt it, hide whatever you have, give to others. Like that's kind of more in the talk about it, but that can be a big thing. Like just any excess, like, but also in a family that doesn't say a thing about it can create a sense of instability or being unsure about, how comfortable and safe you actually are. If you see your parents working really hard, counting on their paycheck or kind of being mindful about the prices at the grocery store or saying, no, you can't have that, whatever, but not really ever explaining money or particular financial situation, that can lead to a lot of anxiety and uncertainty as a child. And not to say like, parents need to put all this stress on you about either having or not having money. I mean, that's a whole other issue. But I don't know. It's just when something feels kind of like taboo or off topic, it just takes on such a weight. And so when you begin to look at your money, like really get in to your bank account and start looking at your money, you'll begin to see the way that it's like water and it flows. It comes in tides, in and out, in and out, in and out. Because at the end of the day, it's a resource, a currency. You see what I did there? And not something to be disregarded or hoarded, but used as a resource to trade for other things, to live the life you want or to live at all. We have to trade our money in and out for shelter, for food. You can trade it for the things that you need or you want in life. And this really comes down to our values too, with what you want in life, like experience, pleasure, stability, nourishment, safety, fun, connection, expansion, joy. Some of those are more of a necessity, like maybe stability for you, having a house, maybe one day being a homeowner. That's super important to you. Other people are fine to rent because they can trade in their money for just like a big enough place and then use the rest to travel or to build their business, or they like to have the freedom to not be tied down to one place. It's so personal, but we really want to think of money as the currency to trade in and out for the things that we need and that we value in our life. And at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. So once you get your arms around the numbers and your personal values and what matters most to you, you can start to decide what gets allocated to what. So maybe you want to trade in some money for a sense of joy or being pampered by getting your nails done. Maybe you want to store some away as a trade for a sense of safety and stability. But it's all about balance. And the more that we can see this and see just even getting our arms around the numbers and the amount as like, okay, so here's this pile of one type of resource of money that really doesn't mean much to me if I can't trade it in for anything else. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a pile of money but you're hungry. So then you start to break down into chunks. Where does that pile get delineated out to? And so some practical tips. Getting access to your bank account, first and foremost, most likely through a mobile app these days, but get access, girl. If you got the Wells Fargo debit card or something, get that account, get the app, log in. You'll probably see a checking and a savings account. And maybe you logged in once a long time ago or whatever. Get back in there and just get a first initial glance of what do I have? If you have other accounts too, make sure to have access to all the accounts. Credit cards, have access to all of your credit card information and your statements, know where to find it. You can make a spreadsheet. You could just make it as simple as a notes app, like writing, okay, Chase Bank, here's the website for that. This is the app for Wells Fargo. Over here, I got the Apple Card. I can look at that in my wallet, on my phone, whatever it is. But get all the sources. And maybe get a money management app. This is next step, but really can be very helpful. I used to use a software called Quicken, but now I use this app called Monarch because to me it's really intuitive and quick. You swipe through, basically. They kind of gamified it. All your transactions, all the things that you spent money on or where you got money coming in will pop up, kind of like a swipe thing, and you categorize them. Okay, so here was my groceries. A transaction, $35 from H-E-B comes up. Okay, that's groceries. $5 to Starbucks, coffee shop. You start to categorize so that you can see exactly where your money is flowing to. For me, a large percentage goes to groceries and dining every month. I know I have a set amount of how much goes to my rent. I have a set amount to my insurance. Utilities sometimes fluctuates, but I start to see, and it makes a pie chart of like how much you're spending on what, how much goes to clothing, to entertainment, to charity, whatever. And I really like that too because it can link all my bank accounts, my credit cards, and everything. So it all files into that money management app. So I can really get a sense for the total sum of all of my money. And so once you break things into categories and you understand where your money is going to most right now, you can start a savings account and you can decide how much you want to save into that account every month. Because once you know where all your spending is going to, you'll see how much is left over. And then that can go into savings or that can go into an investment, which is a whole other conversation. But just to have it out there, because I asked my very financially savvy friend her tips, and she reminded me of investment being an important side of how we allocate our money. But anyway, once you see how much you have left over to save, you can either plan to move that in manually every month. A lot of times, if you're working for an employer, the paycheck system they use has an option to like send certain percentages to different bank accounts. So what I do, and this is from my father who taught me a lot about money growing up, is a certain percentage of every paycheck, it's 10% for me, immediately goes to my savings. It actually goes to my retirement, my Roth. But it immediately goes to savings. So it never shows up in my checking account. Like when I pull out my debit card or whatever, credit card to use, the money to my savings account never gets touched. And that's really nice because then at least I know, okay, whatever. Every paycheck, 10% is going. I don't even have to look at it. I don't have to think about it, And then when I log in every now and then to look at that, Roth IRA, I can see, oh, okay, got a little savings, got a little like security going on for me. And so that can be a really helpful way, really simple. Just knowing the ins and outs of how much you're making, how much you're spending every month, and then having some set way to save or additionally to invest a certain amount of your money so that you can feel secure and you can also have the freedom to allocate your spending money to the things that are most important to you. So that's like super practical. It's funny talking about it because I'm like, damn, I never really get like super into the nitty gritty of like, I don't know, this just feels really like grounded. But I actually really enjoy talking about this kind of topic. I was surprised because when I was answering or chose this question, I was like, oh, it's kind of weird to get into money. But again, it's such a big part of our wellness and to living the kind of life that we want and being really intentional. So it just felt too important to pass up and honestly was really pleasantly surprising to me that I think it's a great thing to talk about. And there's so many layers here that we could go even deeper in on too if y'all are interested. So let me know what you think. Let me know your best financial tips. I would love to hear it for myself and to be able to share it with others. So yeah, comment below or find me on social media at the EvergreenRx and share your thoughts with me. I really hope this was helpful. Overall, I really hope if you have any financial fears or anxiety or shame, I hope this soothes a little bit of it for you. And I'm here for you. And I'm sure other people listening are too and are in the same kind of boat. So yeah, we'll end it there until I see you next Wednesday. Good luck getting into the numbers, crunching some numbers, and take care.